Cool. We are now in public hearing.
Welcome, everyone. Dr. Ball and I tonight will be introducing our capital project, our public hearing. You've all seen this before, but tonight. So we will do some welcome and introductions, Conceptual project timeline, for history and priorities, planning process, early scope discussions, financial considerations, and proposed project schedule. So tonight, we obviously have the district here, our partners, SEI Design Group and Campus Construction Management have been with us all along in developing the project that goes out February 2nd.
SEI Design Group is our architects, and Campus Construction is project management.
So our conceptual project timeline.
So just speaking real broadly, we'll give a more detailed project timeline at the end of the presentation, but speaking real broadly, we're in the green area, which is the planning phase, where we're really talking about what's the vision for the future, what are we trying to do with our educational spaces, and what do we really want to include from a scope perspective in the project. And once we determine that, then we come up with a project value, and we put out a referendum to the public for vote, because any capital project that we endeavor upon requires voter approval. Beyond that, once the voter approval either, hopefully happens on February 2nd, then we begin the design phase where we do concept development, schematic, and design development. We do bid documents, and then we, from there, the third phase is where we start construction. And so this is a multi-year process. It's a long process, and it involves a lot of different stakeholders, and so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So from a history perspective, currently we're finishing up our $68 million capital project that was approved in May of 2018. That project included nearly every building in the district, and really did a whole lot to improve spaces for staff and students, as well as the community. Most recently, we're finishing up the Performing Arts Center. We hope to have that turned over in mid to late February so that we can start using that space for music in our schools month in March, and eventually use it for community use as well, likely not until the fall of 2022. So again, those are the areas that we touched in the current $68 million project. One thing to note is that during the planning of that project, there were some items that were reduced from the original scope of the project. So originally that scope was supposed to be about $100 million. It was trimmed down to about 68, primarily for financial considerations. And so some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight were things that were in the scope of the original project from the last phase. So when thinking about a project, we consider our priorities. Under the New York State Education Department's regulations, we have to do what's called a building condition survey every 5 years. And so we, in designing this current proposal, have included some of those many ongoing infrastructure needs that are determined through that building condition survey process. And what is that process? We have architects come in to our buildings, and they look at all the spaces within our district. They look at the conditions of the facilities, they look at the conditions of the equipment within the facilities, whether it's univents in classrooms or boilers in different spaces, sometimes basements. They look at flooring, they look at roofs. And so they look at all of the facilities that we have, and then from there, they help us prioritize things based on the condition that they're currently in. And so the reason why the New York State Education Department requires us to do that is they want districts to be aware of what their needs are so that they can provide the healthiest and safest environments for kids that we can. So it's an important process, that PCS process, and it's something that we did in 2021. So the other thing that we consider is prudent and sound financial planning. And so one of the things that we've been talking about more recently is instead of having really large projects that we put out to the public that often have a significant impact on our taxes, we want to do more regular and ongoing projects, and we want to plan for them financially so that when we put them out to vote, they have little or no tax impact, which is what we're trying to accomplish with this project proposal. So from a planning process, we started back in December of 2020, so over a year ago. And we really started by reviewing those phase 1A items with principals and assistant principals in buildings. And so when I talked earlier about we reduced that $100 million project down to $68 million, there's a lot of things that were on the list, and we wanted to review those with principals and assistant principals to determine, are any of those things that were on the list before still priorities for your building? And are there any other things that have since arisen through your understanding of what's going on in your buildings that may be priorities for you as we look towards the future? And so that process again started over a year ago. From there, we conducted weekly meetings and building tours with the design team and construction managers, so SEI and campus construction. And we had conversations about the BCS, what was on the list, what were the priorities of the district. From there, we did an analysis of that building condition survey. We recognized that there's $104 million of work that is detailed in that building condition survey. But not all of that work are things that are going to need to be addressed in the next 3 to 5 years. So a lot of things on that list might say, oh, well, this roof has 10 more years of life on it. So we obviously don't need to address that in the next 3 to 5 years. That's going to be something that we address a little further down the road. So we recognize that there's about $4 million worth of priority items, things that we know we need to take care of sooner than later. From a planning process perspective, we evaluated programmatic impacts. We looked at various UPK and district office options. So one thing that we know is that we're looking to bring back some of our UPK students to the district. And so what we were trying to do is think about where can we potentially put those students, knowing where our spaces are, and where can we do it in a way that we can get aid back from the state on it, which is an important component. We want to make sure that we're doing work that's aidable, which we'll talk about in a little more detail. And then we generated an initial project scope list based on all of that building level feedback. From there, we evaluated the financial impacts, and that's how we got to where we are today.
Gates Chili's next potential capital project is all about building brighter futures. This estimated $45.5 million project will have no tax impact on our school community and will address areas throughout the district in need of upgrades. If you come out to vote on February 2nd, you'll be voting on work at multiple buildings. At Florence Brasser Elementary School, a new parking lot and traffic pattern will alleviate congestion and increase safety at drop-off and pickup. In addition, the relocated main office will provide secure entry to the school for staff, students, and visitors. This move would also improve accessibility for people with disabilities. At Gates Chili High School and Gates Chili Middle School, arts and technology spaces will be brought up to 21st century standards. Technology classrooms at both schools will receive enhanced technological interfaces and better layouts. And as our music program continues to thrive and grow, band, choral, and practice spaces will be redesigned to accommodate a multitude of programs and rehearsal types. Work near the middle school would also include major upgrades to our district's athletic fields, with the addition of a multi-purpose turf field. It would be used for baseball, softball, lacrosse, and soccer. And similar to Spartan Stadium, this field will provide students and the community at large the opportunity to utilize fields regardless of weather conditions. Finally, Gates Chili has a plan to bring more of its youngest learners back on campus with the conversion of our current administration building into a pre-kindergarten center. The space will feature 4 classrooms, a nurse's office, playgrounds, and more. The district's careful planning and saving means this project would come at no additional cost to the Gates Chili school community. The entire project will be funded by capital reserve funds and state aid. Remember to vote on February 2nd at the Gates Chi High School Fieldhouse from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. We thank you for your continued support of our students and programs. Go Spartans!
So with the early scope discussions at the admin building, we're looking to bring 4 UPK classrooms back. Ironically, in the last project, we cut out the concession stand. It will now be where my office is. So it'll continue to serve our community in a different way as a concession stand. There'll also be bath restrooms there that the community will have access to. And we'll address priority initiatives from our 2021 building condition survey. Now, student support services will still remain in the building as well as our registrar. At the high school, we'll be renovating the technology classrooms, and then those administrative offices not staying back would come over to what is the old West Side Academy, as well as address priority initiatives from our building condition survey, which we'll talk about in a little. At the middle school, we'll renovate both the music and tech classrooms and create a multi-purpose field with additional parking right along Buffalo Road. We have 2 turf fields, one for softball, one for baseball. And then, as you can see, multi-purpose use of the field for soccer, lacrosse, etc. The youth sports are very excited to have access to this as well. As we know, spring in Western New York can be pretty interesting. And then at Florence Brasser, we're going to relocate a secure main entry and main office and AIS classrooms. The other 3 buildings received secure new main entrances. That will happen here this round for Brasser. And again, it can be a bear to pick up and drop off with the Florence Brasser Bears. We got a couple chuckles. So we're going to revise the bus loop and parking. So some of the early scope discussions from our building condition survey, you'll see in general, a lot of electric, water service, roof replacement, flooring, ventilation and HVAC systems. So these buildings will all be touched these ways. And again, with the middle school, they're very excited about a new water heater, stage lighting upgrades, as well as my favorite, their public address system. There are times it sounds like the Peanuts teacher, so it's time to upgrade that with this. And then again, some upgrades with fire alarms and stage lighting at both middle school and Brasser. The financial part.
So from a financial perspective, based on the scope discussions that we've had, the proposed referendum value is $45.5 million. Some important things to point out when thinking about this project, some of the questions that we've received along the way is, well, why aren't you doing work in this building, or why aren't you doing work in that building? The state essentially gives us an allocation of money that we can get reimbursed for every 5 years. And so there's a rolling aid window is what we call it. And once that 5 years is up, then it opens back up a certain amount of aid we can get back based on essentially more or less, I'm going to whittle it down to something that's pretty easy, which is our classrooms. Based on how many square feet of classrooms we have, they give us a certain amount of aid for that building. Okay, and so every 5 years that amount resets. And so when looking at capital work and looking towards the future, we want to see, where do we have that aid ability? Which spaces can we renovate that we can get aid back on it? Because for every dollar we spend, although there's some other factors involved as well, we get a significant amount of aid back from the state, if it's aidable. So if we were to do work in some of the spaces where we're currently doing work, for instance, if we did a lot of work in this building right now, a significant portion of it would not be aidable because that 5-year rolling aid window would not be over yet. Okay, so we're looking to do work in spaces where there's aidability. And so some of the questions around, well, when are we going to address this or address that, is if we're continuing to do smaller ongoing projects, Then down the road, when the aid windows open back up for certain buildings, we would look to do work in those spaces where we know that there are some needs, but frankly, we wouldn't get the bang for the buck if we didn't do it in the right way. And so the other thing we want to do is we want to utilize our reserves and fund balance. We want to plan long-term to be saving for capital work so that we don't have major fluctuations in taxes. And so that was very important to us when looking at this project is, how can we utilize our savings while maximizing state aid so that we can get the most bang for our buck and have little to no tax impact. And so that was very important when thinking about this project, is we didn't want to go out to the public again with a referendum that would significantly increase taxes. One other group I want to introduce is Bernie Donegan's office. They're here representing as well, and they've been very integral in helping us think about the considerations relating to financing this project. They have been incredible in helping us along the way and have been working for the district for a very long time. Proposed project schedule in a little more detail. So we've done the planning and research. We've collected public input. We also had the board authorize this planning effort, and now we're looking to do a public vote on February 2nd. After that's complete, and so one of the other questions that we get to is, what's going to be specifically in this technology space? Like what equipment is going to be in there? How's it going to be laid out? We don't talk about that during the scope discussion. In full transparency, the architects aren't going to endeavor upon doing a full amount of design work until a project is approved and they can get paid for their services. It just doesn't make sense. So once the public approves, hopefully February 2nd, then from there, we will start having constituency group meetings where we will get together with staff members to talk about how will this space actually be designed out. The way we price the project is by looking at unusual costs for spaces. So per square foot, how much does a technology space usually cost? And so that's how we cost out the project. And then from here, what we'll do if the project is approved is we'll start having conversations about what exactly will be in certain spaces and how will they be designed. After that, we have to submit design plans to the New York State Education Department, a division called Facilities Planning. And their review process could take up to a year. And so we're going to work through that process. From there, once SED gives us their stamp of approval, which they're going to ask for certain revisions once they see what the plans are. Once we get finalized approval, then from there, we will bid the project. And then once bids are awarded, we will begin construction. And so really that construction will likely happen in spring of 2024 and fall of 2025. So we're looking a number of years out from where we sit today. A special edition of the newsletter was mailed to district residents outlining the proposal. There's a lot of information in there. If you didn't see us, please let us know. Questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. Again, the vote 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the field house, February 2nd. You get more information at that link. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ball.
Sorry.
The public hearing is now closed. Motion to resume the regular business meeting. Motion, please. Ms. Coffey. Dr. Richards, all in favor? The vote is unanimous. Thank you very much. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to QC Pride Awards. Ms. Brown.
There we go. Good evening, President Chitensky, Superintendent Daily, and members of the Board of Education. It is my pleasure this evening to present a GC Pride Award to Kathy Acton. Kathy is quite unlike any other substitute that I've ever encountered. I met Kathy 5.5 years ago when I first started working for Gates Child. She was subbing one day as receptionist at district office, and she was just so kind and chatty, and she knew everyone. And I remember asking Barb Meisner, my former assistant who retired, "What's the story with Kathy? She's so nice." And Barb said, "Kathy has been subbing for the district since the mid-'80s. She has always been a sub for the district. She loves it here. Nobody really knows why she loves it so much, but she does. And she is one of the most vocal proponents of how great Gates Child is and what a wonderful community it is." And so through the years, I've gotten to know Kathy, and I've heard stories about her grandkids. I've heard stories about her family. And she always has a kind word. She always has just a calming presence. She does a wonderful job. Whenever she fills in any building, she knows all of the roles in the district. She's such an asset to us. She has served in a substitute capacity for us for more than 35 years. And I just want to put that in perspective. I won't say how old I am, but she has served as a substitute for us for longer than Eva has been alive. So I commend her for all of her hard work and dedication to Gates Child, to our community. She is the embodiment of respect, responsibility, hard work, and compassion. She is a joy to be around. She has, for those of you who don't know, there's a labor shortage going on right now, and we have been without a receptionist at the admin building since August. And until 2 weeks ago, Kathy was coming nearly every single day to serve in that role for us. And always with a smile on her face. Even between Christmas and New Year, she was willing to come in to help us. She is just a phenomenal human being. I can't say enough kind words about her. And I'm so thankful that I've gotten to know her in my time at Gates Child, because she has certainly made my life richer for having met her. So, Kathy, it is my honor to present to you this GC Pride Award.
Hey, Kathy. Good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you.
Congratulations. How wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Ms. Parado shut me down. Good evening, Board of Education, Mr. Potensky, Superintendent Daily. Thank you for having me to present a GC Pride Award. I promise by the end of this meeting, you will be tired of hearing my voice. But I am here to present a GC Pride Award to Mr. Brian Solinsky. Come on up, Mr. Brian Solinsky. You wouldn't. Mr. Solinsky, a senior principal and one of the founding members of SEI Design Group, which is our architectural firm, has over 30 years of professional experience in planning, design, and construction of educational facilities. Mr. Solinsky first started in the Gates Chi Central School District over 7 years ago during the 2015 Building Condition Survey. Since then, he has worked with the district on the current $68 million multi-phase capital project, touching all buildings. He has also worked on various energy performance projects, the American Recovery Plan HVAC upgrade project, transportation upgrades, planning for the upcoming $45.5 million capital project, voter authorization, and much more. Did I miss anything?
I can't even remember.
All right, Mr. Solinsky has a true ability to manage complex projects and bring them to successful completion. He works well with district stakeholders to design and implement spaces that overwhelmingly meet the needs of students and staff alike, and he does it with passion. Mr. Solinsky has been a pivotal member of our team here in Gates Chi, and his legacy will live on for many years. We thank Mr. Solinsky for all that he does for our school community now and into the future. Thank you, Mr. Solinsky, for living the Spartan way. Here's your GC Pride Award.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to let us do this.
Nice job, Brian.
Here's one other thing.
Superintendent Daily, agenda changes.
We have personnel and disposal item changes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to board president comments. I'm going to keep my comments short this evening because my voice is not cooperating. I just want to again shout out, thank all the teachers, staff, and administration for their efforts in another week of fun and excitement at Gates Chi. When you have a crazy day, I want you to take pause and remember some of the things that our postgraduates have shared with us about you. They talk about the sense of community they have when they were at Gates Chi, the caring you shared with them, your mentorship and leadership. That is what we need to focus on, and I'm going to make sure that you remember that you are positively impacting students every day. Our graduates tell us about it year over year, and that's what's important at this time. Thank you very much. Moving on to points of interest. Ms. Coffey.
I've had the opportunity to participate in the middle school SIT meeting this past week, and it's a great time to hear different parents from middle school and different students and staff all come together to be able to discuss things for their children's experience.
Any other points of interest? Hearing none, moving on to report of meetings.
Thank you. We had a Monroe County School Board Association Labor Relations Committee meeting. We had a review of super eval, which we use to help us evaluate the superintendent as well as ourselves. I think it was well attended. We have both in person and remote learners and everything else. And just a reminder about the February 5th legislative breakfast at the DoubleTree. If you are interested, just let kind of know, and you can be registered for it. It starts at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moscato. Other reports of meetings? Hearing none. Moving on to visitor comments. The Gates Chi Central School District Board of Education invites public comment at this time. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. We ask that individuals state their name and address prior to comments and utilize the podium microphone to address the board. Although the board will not respond directly to individual comments at this time, items brought to the attention of the board may be taken under consideration for future response or action. In order to comply with the laws related to confidentiality, we ask that issues related to specific school district personnel or students be brought up to the attention of the superintendent of schools privately. The board reserves the right to terminate a speaker's comments if his or her comments are in excess of 3 minutes, are repetitive, or are not appropriate for discussion in an open public forum. Charles Johnson.
Well, Happy New Year. Okay, I'm gonna start with the stuff that you guys probably don't wanna hear first. Dealing with the masks and the kids. The CDC came out saying that the masks don't work and that the N95 is a lot better. Just to remind you, we've been wearing masks for 2 years. Also, the UK has done a study with kids wearing masks in school and not wearing masks in school, and they found that there wasn't much of a difference. Okay, I guess the next thing, really quick, just going with the race. I did have a chance to kind of go on the website, kind of read some of the stuff that you guys recommend for, I guess, reading material. There's a flaw in that. It's mostly one-sided. My son is a COVID 2020 graduate. I happened to ask him if he ever had racial slurs. He did say yes. I raised my son not to kind of fight or anything like that, to just kind of back away and use words or whatever. So with that, I guess it's, again, the race thing is one-sided. I'll talk more about that later on. Jesse Smollett, he was found guilty of lying. I don't know how many fights might have broken out in school because of that. I just want to point that out. Okay, enough of that crap. Paper in middle school, the program, I don't know too much about it. I didn't have a chance to ask one of the kids on the street, but I was wondering if the wrong kids are using it and the right kids are not using it. What I mean is the kids that are struggling, the C, D, F kids, if they're using it more than the kids that are the B, A students just trying to improve their grade. And I guess I'll just end there. My time is probably almost up. With that, also, congratulations on your advancement. Okay, that's it. Sorry to waste your time if you consider that wasting your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to K through 12 PE report.
Very much. Board of Education, President Patensky, Superintendent Daily. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm here to give an update in our physical education program district-wide. With me tonight is Mike Candelari from the middle school and Glenn Pittman from the elementary school, both content leaders in physical education and GC grads too.
Okay,
So-
those parties.
So in discussion with our department, what we wanted to cover tonight, there was a lot of discussion on what we wanted to cover. And we wanted to be concise, but we wanted to focus on the last couple of years. So what we decided is we've been evolving in our physical fitness unit that we teach district-wide, but it's really been evolving in a way where we're focusing on functional strength training, and it aligns with the facilities that we've been updating here, both at the middle school, but also at the high school too. So that's going to be a large portion of what we discuss here tonight. So very briefly, functional strength training, what that means. It's really using multiple muscle groups simultaneously in realistic activities. We're really trying to focus in physical education and helping our students manage their daily lives, whether they're home doing yard work, whether they're getting something out of the top shelf, basically getting away from the traditional fitness gym experience someone might have out in the community at another location, and really giving our students the knowledge and background to participate in life and be as active as possible. So this process really started with conversations in 2019, pre-COVID actually. So some of these photos, it'll look a little weird. We are maskless in it. This wasn't taken just yesterday. And so we started talking about what we needed, updates in facilities, updates in equipment, some of which was accomplished through capital projects, especially at the middle school level, and then updates we made here as a district at the high school level. And then our curriculum work. Our teachers coming together during the summers, updating our curriculum, professional development we participated in, how we started implementing lessons, and then through our department meetings, reflecting on how things are going, how we can improve. We're always promoting on social media as the most followed social media in the district. We'd like to keep that going. And then ultimately really aligning this so that our middle and high school students have a basis of knowledge when it comes to functional strength training, so they can go right into our athletic program and really build upon that. So just briefly here, I know you've all been in this space. This is the Middle School Fitness Center. Through the capital project, one of our big goals was to create more open space. Traditionally, you might go into a gym and there's a lot of selectorized stationary equipment. We still have those because they have a use as well as cardio equipment, but we really wanted to maximize the space. That's why you'll see the selectorized equipment in the top right here, from my perspective, around the perimeter, creating a lot of space for students to use bars, use kettlebells, use what we really want to expose them to. So then they have a basis when they get to the high school, and then hopefully get into our athletic program. Another benefit to opening this wall is there's increased visibility for our physical education staff. We can have a phys ed teacher there that can see all corners of this space, so there aren't any blind spots. Additionally, the equipment that's in the top right is from the high school. We moved that down to the middle school. It's fantastic equipment, and it's now on our 6-month maintenance plan. So every 6 months, the company we work with not only maintains the equipment at the high school, but now at the middle school as well too. And then the new equipment we bought, we repurposed the leased equipment, and we actually sold it at auction, made more money than it would have cost to send it back, and it helped finance some of the new equipment that's in high school as well too. High school, you've all seen this space as well. Again, we wanted to maximize open space. So you'll see the turf running through. That's 80 feet of turf there. That really allows us to do the functional strength training that we wanted. We're pushing sleds there. We're doing farmer walks with kettlebells and weighted vests. We're really trying to just get away from, in both physical education and athletics, doing stationary movement. We really want the kids active, and we do that in physical education too. And that turf really allows us to diversify the movements that we're doing. So going back to 2019, how we got here. This is a photo I pulled off of Twitter. Mike Candelaire is right there, front row, just like when he was in high school here.
Yeah.
And
Disciplinary reasons.
yeah, disciplinary reasons. So.
Keep control.
This really started. So the gentleman at the top there is in charge of Next Level Strength and Conditioning, which is the company we contract through for our strength and conditioning program here after schools for our student athletes. And he's also a physical education teacher in the area. So we brought him in. He started talking about how we could transition our curriculum. And it was a great resource. Started a lot of great conversations. We started spinning our wheels on what we could do with the space we have. And from there, we had additional trainings. Here we are again with our strength coach at the time. Again, Nate came in from Next Level. This is a photo from 2019 where our phys ed staff and some of our coaches on a superintendent conference day, we got into the old space at the high school, and we were actively participating in some of our movements. We were using PVC piping to make sure our posture is correct, and we use those PVC piping and broom handles and anything else we can really teach with our kids, so they're in a safe position to move their body even without weight, just using their body weight. And then we still use those at the middle school and high school when we started introducing weight, and as they get older, introducing hopefully more weight. But this was a great experience as a phys ed teacher, professional development. Anytime you're moving, you're active. We always really appreciate that. So that was the purpose here for this professional development. And it really led us to what are our priorities at every level. And at the elementary level, we're not putting kids under squat racks or anything like that. But we're prioritizing their alignment, their posture, how to be safe in certain movements. And we're introducing resistance bands. You'll see a couple photos of students using resistance bands, trying to use those large muscle groups while engaging in this curriculum. And then it just advances as they get to the middle school. We start to introduce weight bars, very lightweight, dumbbells and kettlebells, and there's a real focus on core strength, range of motion, flexibility. Again, it's a priority, and it actually helps our student athletes and our students maximize their strength possibilities. And then when we get to the high school, that's where we start introducing weight while maintaining correct alignment in their posture, where we're really working on speed of movement and efficiency of movement, as opposed to as much as you can, 1 rep max, be the loudest person in the gym. And it's going really well. So here are just some photos taken recently. This is your gym, actually, right, Glenn? So here we are at Armstrong. We're using our hockey sticks there and doing the exact same thing we did on that training 2+ years ago, where we're making sure our students are in safe position and using other students to help test that, so they're communicating with students about what a safe position is and what good core strength is in these plank holds, for instance. And you'll see it here. Again, this is an example of us introducing resistance bands while utilizing our rock climbing wall to anchor these, where students are starting to use large muscle groups and understanding that when we're discussing it with them too. So it really builds the basis for when our students then go to the middle school. Here's some station work with our students doing one knee dumbbell presses, really isolating the shoulder while keeping a good posture throughout their core, which becomes a really big talking point when we start using barbell work, especially in standing positions. Here we are in the middle school, really introducing some of our bigger movements. We have the flat bench press there on the right, and then the back squat there on the left with spotters, communicating with our students how to spot appropriately, really building that base. So when they do come to the high school, we don't necessarily have to reteach it or spend a large amount of time reteaching it. They already have that foundation. And when they get into modified athletics and then high school athletics, they already have that when they're with our strength coach. And this is, I know it's kind of a funky picture. It's a little tilted here. This is actually, we have 2 students here doing the jerk, doing the cleans right here on the barbell. And it's not a lot of weight. Those are bumper plates, 10s on each side, but they're actually in a hang clean position where they end in a front squat rack position. And when we talk about efficiency of movements and how to move from just above your knees to in the front shoulder rack, we work with lighter weight until they have a strong foundation there. But this is a really good example of the multi-muscle group movements that we want our students doing, so their overall strength is good for physical education, but also for athletics. So this kind of gives you a rough overview, and really it's doing a really nice job of bringing our students understanding of how, when they do then go into the world, and maybe they join a gym, maybe they come back, use our fitness facility if they still live locally, they have a strong basis of understanding that they can continue. And if they're participating in athletics, it's just an added bonus so that we can build upon that. Did I miss anything, coaches?
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Look at that. Good feedback from a coach right there.
There you go.
So questions on that, or where we've been since 2019?
What is a kettlebell?
A kettlebell, good question. As Coach Candelari's kind of showing.
It's pretty much a rounded ball that has a handle that kind of comes up and around. It allows you a little bit more freedom, a little bit more movement, especially with your wrists and turning it than you would have with a standard dumbbell. So it kind of replaces the dumbbell. You can do a lot of exercises that you would do a dumbbell with a kettlebell, again, to kind of add to, again, the functionality of a lot of the movements.
I'll show you a picture too, Mike, after this. What's great is what you see students doing there. What's really important is the hinge in a lot of our movements when they're flexing at their hip. and moving weight forward using their hips, their posterior chain, and their core to get that weight up, either at their shoulder height or above their head. A kettlebell is a great learning tool because with a weight, you can really get it around your wrist, and it really helps teach our students, if this is making any sense, teach students how to use their momentum and core strength to get a weight from one place to the next. And a kettlebell is a really good teaching tool in that. They're also really cool to like hold in your hand and impresses a lot of people. Other questions?
Not
Yes.
a question. My middle schooler really is enjoying PE this year.
That's great.
Like his favorite class, which was never my favorite class. But I thought you guys should know that he really
Perfect.
is.
I love
Ben's
that.
doing a great job. Nice kid, real
He
nice
was sore
guy.
this week.
You can get them kettlebells for the holidays.
There you
next year.
go, there you go.
Other questions?
No other questions?
Great. Thank you very much for your
Thank you
time.
so much,
Thank
appreciate
you.
it, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you very much. Nice one.
Moving on to budget update.
Hello again. So I'm here to give a budget planning update. So on the agenda, we're gonna quickly do just a little federal funds update to let you know where we're at with federal funding and all of the various applications we've been putting in as part of the coronavirus relief. I'll talk about revenue estimates, state aid, just talk a little bit about where we're at year to date with state aid. The executive proposal for 22-23, the tax levy limit, fund balance and reserve use and other revenues, vote propositions, and then next steps. So federal funds update. So there's a lot of different provisions for federal funds currently available to us. Some grant-specific updates. The CARES Act, that was one from last year. If you'll remember, we had a line item on our state aid reports that said, here's an estimate for what you're going to get for the CARES Act. We have claimed and received all of those monies. So that's an update on the CARES Act. The Coronavirus Relief and Recovery Act, that plan has been approved, which is good news. On the American Recovery Plan, we submitted an initial plan, and all across the state, districts received a response saying you need to modify this, this, and this. We were one of the districts because it's all districts. And so we're currently working on making those modifications for resubmission so that that plan will be approved. There's something called the American Recovery Plan Set Aside, and we had to put money into very specific areas relating to things like learning loss. That plan has been approved, so that's good. We can start spending that money. And then the last one is FEMA. There's provisions that allow us to submit an application to FEMA for reimbursement. We currently have about $1.2 million of expenses that the district has incurred relating to purchasing things and paying for staff members to deal with things relating to COVID. And so we're going to submit that application probably in early March, and hopefully we'll get a good amount of funding back from that application as well. So next steps for us is once the ARP plan is approved, we're going to post plans to the district website. And then we're going to endeavor upon the facilities planning process, because as part of our plans, we're looking to replace up to 10 HVAC units on the top of some of our roofs that are in poor condition. And we have some called Four Seasons is the brand that are very old, and we're just limping them along. Luckily, we have a really good maintenance team. And so our HVAC mechanic has been really good at keeping them running, but they do need to be replaced. So revenue estimates. So just a breakdown of our current budget. About 49 cents on the dollar is school property taxes. Hello. 38 cents on the dollar is state aid. About 3 cents on the dollar is sales tax from Monroe County. So for taxable items that are purchased in the county, we get about 3 cents for every dollar of revenue that we have from the county. Fund balance and reserves is about 5 cents on every dollar of revenue. And then all of the lesser items equate to about 5 cents as well, including interest earnings, payments in lieu of taxes, Medicaid admission fees, and tuition. So when thinking about the 21-22 state aid, the budget cycle that we're under right now, the current budget is a little over $45 million. We're anticipating no issues with receiving state aid. In the prior year, we had some issues surrounding transportation aid because the state said that they were going to withhold money for when we kept staff members on staff and paid during the early part of the pandemic. They said that they weren't going to reimburse us for that. They're currently indicating that they're not holding back any aid as we look at this year. And so that's good news that we're on target. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the executive aid proposal. Governor Cuomo is no longer, sorry. Oh, sorry. Governor Cuomo is no longer in office. He was in office since 2011, from 2011 to 2021. He's no longer in office. Lieutenant Governor is now at the helm, and she has been a lot more favorable to schools and education than the past governor was. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is some of the things that she's doing versus what was being done in the past, and how she's making it a lot more clear and understandable for districts, especially for planning purposes, as we look at next year's budget cycle. So the executive proposal. So I will back up one step and say that at around right after Martin Luther King Jr. Day, every year the governor releases an aid proposal or an aid package for education across New York State. And so after the governor releases their executive proposal, from there, districts and groups have conversations about that proposal, and then the legislative body gets into a conversation with the executive branch, and eventually they get to a place where they're comfortable with a state budget and an aid proposal, and they put that out usually on April 1st. In many years prior, sometimes it would take longer. Over the last 10 years, I think it's only been extended beyond April 1st one time, or maybe April 1st, April 2nd. It's only been extended one time. Other than that, we've had on-time budgets. And so we're hoping for that as well this year so that we can make decisions about next year's financing. So it included an overall increase of $2.07 billion to education across New York State. That's a good chunk of change, and the prior governor wasn't providing that kind of funding to schools over the last 10 years. The only issue with what's happening right now is that they're phasing in foundation aid. They started last year. Foundation aid is the aid that districts receive, generally speaking. It's not those expense-driven aids like transportation and BOCES aid. Foundation aid is the money that we get based on student demographics, population, things of that nature. So the state has said that they're going to phase in foundation aid over 3 years. Last year was the first year. This is the second year. Next year will be the final year of foundation aid phase-in. And so what that means is we're getting a significant increase this year to help us balance our budget. We'll get a good increase next year, currently under the current plan. After that, we don't know what it's going to reset to. So it is something that we need to consider as we financially plan for the future. Although we're looking at a decent increase this year and next year, in the following year it could be back down to 2 or 3%, which means that we may have to determine how that is going to impact future budgets. So a really important piece to note that's really beneficial to schools is that there's less confusion on these aid runs. Last year, I presented to you, I think it was 7 slides breaking down the proposal because it was super confusing. A number of things were included that aren't state aids to schools. The governor had decided to take a whole bunch of categories and collapse them into something called services aid. So it was hard for us to disaggregate exactly what we were getting and for what. And also, the governor had included STAR in the aid runs. And STAR is not an aid to schools. It is a rebate program for homeowners. And so that added some confusion as well. the current aid runs also don't include federal funding. So last year, although federal funding obviously comes from the federal government, the governor was putting them on the executive run, saying that those were funds that the state was providing to schools. Yes, those funds flow through the state to us, but they come from the federal government. And so again, those are no longer on the aid runs, which is very beneficial to us because we can actually talk in real numbers about what the state aid proposal looks like. So state aid by the numbers. That first foundation aid piece, again, that's the general aid that we get based on our specifics within our district. I'm looking at a $1.8 million increase. This is good news because we know that we've had to address minimum wage increases by increasing pay rates to make sure that we can retain staff members here in district, especially those in our support staff units. So this is going to help us fund that, which is great news. UPK, that will stay consistent. The next couple of aid categories, including BOCES, high cost, excess cost, private excess cost, transportation aid, and building aid, those are all driven off of expenses. And so, for instance, that transportation aid piece, the reason why you're seeing a significant increase in that area is that during the pandemic last year, when we were doing some instruction at home and we were doing some instruction in person, we also weren't doing things at certain points of the year like field trips, some sports activities, things that we typically get aid on for transporting. So this year, right now that we're in, we're not getting as much aid as we typically would. When you see that increase, that's getting us back to our normal level of aid. So you'll see $1 million increase there. The drop in high cost, excess cost, that's just driven off of student placements. And so we're seeing a reduction there. BOCES aid is on the increase because we're trying to push as many services and programs to BOCES as we can to get the most bang for our buck, because for every dollar we spend at BOCES, we get a significant proportion of that back. Okay, anything on this slide before I move forward? Okay, so overall, a 7% increase, 7.6% increase, that's a decent increase, and it will help us balance our budget. One thing I will note is that the aid runs are not accurate as it relates to building aid. So if you were to look at how I'm budgeting right now, you would see that I'm using different numbers for building aid. So for 21-22, I'm using $8.1 million. That's because we submitted final cost reports for portions of our project in December. So the state hasn't picked that up yet in their system to give us accurate projections. So when the governor puts out a proposal, they're using information from November 15th, and we submitted those final cost reports in late December. So they haven't picked up that aid. And also looking into 22-23, they don't understand exactly what final cost reports we're going to be submitting in order to get aid back on the $68 million project. So those are the actual aid estimates, and those are the actual numbers that we're using in our tax cap calculation as well. So we're going to see an increase in debt service principal and interest payments of about $500,000, and we're going to see an increase in aid of about $720,000. Foundation aid is good news. Building aid is stabilizing. So that is one thing I wanted to mention, is that after this year, we'll be in a stable condition for the foreseeable future with our aid stabilizing. Transportation aid is also stabilizing. Hopefully, we're able to continue to bring kids to school every day and take them home every day, which will keep that aid consistent. And again, we're looking to shift costs to BOCES so that we can get the most bang for our buck. When thinking about state aid overall, typically we're in a very low position to start, and then there's a lot of negotiating between the governor and the legislature. We don't anticipate right now, based on where the governor came in, that we're going to see a significant increase in the next budget proposal put out by the state. All right. When thinking about the tax levy limit, there's a couple of factors that are really important when calculating the tax levy limit. First of all, the CPI-U. That's the the consumer price index looking over the prior 12 months. So looking at 2021 CPI, it was 4.7%. As school districts were capped at 2% as a base. So even though our costs are going up, this is another consideration, another thing that we have to pay for, is that costs are going up, but we're capped at 2% to start. So we can't go any higher than that. And then from there, we factor in a couple of other things that can increase or decrease the tax cap. So one of them is the tax-based growth factor. Last year, it was 0.56. And essentially what this is it's how much has your tax base grown, and you get to factor that into your tax cap calculation. So it's gone down a little bit, about half of what it was last year. And we have no carryover. We can't carry over any money we didn't collect last year. The capital exclusion change was only $14,000. So when thinking about excludable items, things that you can add back into your levy beyond that 2%, we can add back in about $15,000 for the capital costs. Last year it was $208,000. So we're coming out of that period where we're seeing some increases relating specifically to the capital project. That's gone now. So now we're going to start to see some consistency. So no impact on taxes from the $68 million project any longer. Pilots, our payments in lieu of taxes, we anticipate that those will be stable. That's part of the calculation as well. If they go up or down, then it will impact our tax levy limit calculation. Our tax levy limit is due on March 1st, and I'll have an update for you on exactly where we end up. Final calculation on March 8th. The calculation is the calculation though. So what I submit to the state, the figures that we calculate are the figures that we calculate. So although I won't be sharing that with you until March 8th, just because our board meetings align, it is the calculation. So whatever I submit to the state is the calculation. What we go out as a levy is something that we can determine down the road, but the calculation that I send to the state is the calculation. Other revenues, Monroe County sales tax. Right now, there is some uncertainty on exactly how that's going to play out. But what I will share is that now that Amazon has become taxable online, the county is seeing an increase in sales tax revenue. So that has been helping the county and the district and the state as a whole. I mentioned the pilots. We anticipate schools will be open for business. It's still fairly difficult to estimate exactly where we're going to be at, because with the pandemic, when certain groups weren't running programs, we don't know when or if they will be coming back and what programs will be offered. There aren't as many programs as we once had. Medicaid reimbursement, we anticipate that will be stable, as well as all others. So fund balance and reserve use, we rely on fund balance and reserves to help balance our budget. In the current budget, we're using approximately $5.6 million in exhaustible funds to help balance our budget. I will mention that the first 5 up on the screen are actual reserves. The last one is appropriated fund balance. What that means is they're funds from the current year that we use to balance the next year. Or in this case, on this slide, funds from the prior year that we pulled forward to help balance the following year's budget. Next year is still to be determined. We have to continue working on the expenditure budget and figure out exactly how much we're going to need to help balance our budget. One thing I did want to mention is that our goal is to get to 4% of budget for fund balance and reserve utilization. And so right now in our budget, we're at 4.79%. Last year, we were at 4.5%. We want to get down to 4% or under, because that's a healthy place to be. When you do an analysis of districts and fiscal stress, you don't want to be relying too heavily on fund balance and reserves. So vote propositions. Anticipated vote propositions include the budget approval, the bus purchase proposition, which we will go over the next month, along with the tax cap calculation in greater detail. The capital reserve for technology use, and potentially the capital reserve for vehicle use. We're still working on the vehicle replacement plan, exactly where we're at in that cycle. So those conversations are ongoing. Next steps, continue collecting information for the tax cap calculation, await those final state aid allocations, and collaborate with district-wide staff to continue to refine the expenditure proposal, which we'll talk about in a future meeting. So budget calendar, we have the budget ambassadors coming up. That starts on February 15th. We have a decent number of people who have signed up. Mid-February, initial non-staffing budgets will be finalized. March 1st, our tax levy limit calculation is due. Again, a BOE presentation on March 8th to review the final tax cap and bus proposition. March 16th is our second budget ambassadors meeting. Last year we had two. We didn't need the third one. We reserved the third one tentatively if we have things that still need to be discussed. So I did not include that third meeting in the schedule, but there is a date reserved for that. From there, mid-March, estimating staffing budgets are finalized. And again, those are estimated because over the summer, a lot of things happen. Kids may come in or out of buildings, and so we may have to change our staffing plans. March 22nd, broader Board of Education budget presentation, budget adoption on April 12th. Then the budget hearing and meet the candidate night on May 3rd, followed by the annual budget vote and board election on May 17th. If you have questions, if anyone has questions, this is an email account that we use, communications@gateschi.org. Any questions?
Questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to finance and facility update.
Okay. So last night we had the finance facility and audit committee meeting. We started by reviewing the finance facility and audit committee charter. There had been some recommendations at the prior meeting for adjustments, and we made those adjustments, and the charter was deemed to be okay. We talked about reserves, talking specifically about some potential reserves that we may look to add to the district to help better protect the district from unknown liabilities. And so in the next couple of months, we'll probably be presenting on that. FEMA claim, went over the FEMA claim and where we're at with that. Discussed the fiscal stress score, noting that the district has no designation, which means that the district is not in fiscal stress. Our fiscal stress score actually dropped, which is good news for the district. We talked about the budget that we reviewed today. And then also discussed the fact that Ms. Sanford, district treasurer, was able to get a Walmart community education grant in the amount of $2,000. So that was good news. We also talked about the internal risk assessment and Freed Massick, talking about where we're at in the process and timeline. Reviewed the EPC report for 2020. We got the report a little late, but the EPC report outlined how the district is doing with its energy conservation plan. And then basement insurance claim, went over the final value and deductible. The claim for the damage was approximately $102,000, and it cost the district, because we have insurance, $1,000. So that was good news for the district. And then the meeting adjourned. Any questions?
We have no questions.
Thank you.
Moving on to Education Foundation update. It's coffee.
Sorry, I'm working on it.
The Education Foundation met. They are working very diligently to get ready their fundraising event for the Harlem Wizards, which is hopefully coming up very soon. This spring, it's March 4th. So this is an event we did 2 years ago as well, and it had 3 years ago. Oh, time flies. It had great turnout from the community, a lot of fun, and we're hoping to be able to replicate that again for the families of our community.
Thank you very much. Moving on to postgraduate study session recap.
Would anyone like to discuss postgraduate study session. It was great.
Here, I was gonna say it.
So we had the opportunity to meet with some graduates from this past year, come back and tell us a little bit about their experience at each Life and their experience the year after graduating from high school, in addition to how things from the pandemic impacted their education and their experience. So it's always a great time, and it's always very helpful for us to hear things that they found positive from their experience going throughout their years at each Life, and then different areas where they think could get even better or could be different for kids in the future. So we always learn a lot from that.
Anybody else? I do want to mention one of the things that I did here was the students asked for additional education on how to handle student loan applications and financing. That was one of the, actually that is a recurring theme, because as they leave home, they realize that they have obligations and they feel that they're less than well prepared for that experience. Any other comments? Hearing none, moving on. Motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion, please. Dr. Richards, Ms. Littlewood. Questions or comments? All in favor? Vote is unanimous. Thank you very much. Motion to approve consensus items B through I. Motion, please. Ms. Coffey and Mr. Long, questions or comments? All in favor? The vote is unanimous. Thank you very much. Ms. Parada.
Good evening again. So we have two retirements to acknowledge this evening, both teachers with the district. We're acknowledging Donna Smith and Penny Smith this evening. Both will have served 30 years with the district when they retire. Donna Smith is a science teacher at the high school, and Penny Smith is an art teacher at Paul Road Elementary School. We wish them both well in their retirement and thank them for their many years of dedicated service to the district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Superintendent comments.
Well, it's time to go over our mid-year goals and where we are as a district. Right there. So again, we said by June of 2022, the Gage Charlie Central School District will increase personal and academic success for all learners. Goal 1 being cultivate a welcoming, affirming, and equitable environment where barriers are removed, empowering growth and learning and success for all. So what have we been doing? Well, our classrooms have been practicing community building circles weekly. We created more student-driven murals related to equity. We've added diverse titles and authors to elementary book rooms and building libraries. We helped Student-Driven Cultural Day and planned Cultural Week and Month celebrations in education. And celebrated new students with counseling groups, luncheons, and breakfast mixers. We planned activities with our mental health teams, engaged at total school involvement. And we developed a partnership with Partners in Restorative Practices, or PIRI, for staff training on restorative circles, monthly consultations, and continued support of our strategic plan work. We've partnered with the University of Rochester in their supporting our students program to provide staff and students with increased resources for dealing with mental health needs. We've created and modeled rigorous academic activities during administration and faculty meetings, engaged students in inquiry-based lessons focused on student exploration and choice, which supported increased engagement and individualized work. We organized school resource officer visits in health, PE, criminal justice, and forensic science classes. We've expanded Quick Card computer login use for our students in grades K-1 to increase instructional time. We improved our family communication and access to information with text messages and messages in families' primary home language. And we expressed the value the district places on diversity, equity, and inclusion through our postings, job descriptions, interview questions, and our current onboarding process. And we've explored new ways to engage potential employees who may have language barriers. We've increased student voice in athletic programs by forming a student advisory committee, promoted attendance at student athletic events through social media posts. We launched the Student Athlete of the Week program on social media to highlight student athletes who exhibit the Spartan way on their team. Goal 2 being maximize student growth by being responsive to academic and social emotional needs of our learning community. We launched Paper, the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for secondary students to be able to access one-on-one tutoring help any time of day. We provide literacy and math tutoring after school. We've increased opportunities for credit recovery in order to keep our students on track and eligible for remote graduation and other programming. We held student-based intervention team meetings monthly, reviewed student iReady data on a weekly basis, and shared feedback with classroom and intervention teachers. We joined forces in a New York State Alternative Assessment Work Group to ensure our practices maximize student success. We welcomed back an alumnus recently to provide haircuts to students. We enhanced the High School Career Center for increased availability, support, and authentic learning opportunities for our students. We partnered with local curriculum developers to adapt our curriculum to allow students to explore and interpret local history and systemic barriers to rich primary sources in the inquiry process. We're also ensuring student-staff connections through our DOT project. And we empowered students using a positive behavioral intervention and support approach, or PBIS. We've increased access to mental health services through video counseling and flexed hours. And we provide group counseling focused on grief, loss, and managing anger. We expanded health education curriculum to include lessons on student personal body safety. We've educated staff and families about services and supports offered through New York State. We streamlined our registration process using digital and multilingual forms. And we're finalizing a family communication satisfaction survey to inform future practices that will go out shortly. We're continuing to hold staff to standards of excellence while also trying to assist them in the balancing of their personal family needs and their work responsibilities during a pandemic. We've provided teacher-led professional development and collaboration across grade levels. And in the fall, we held a national conference-style superintendent's conference day focused on equity and our district's strategic plan. So those are our goals, where we are so far this year. We've accomplished quite a bit since September and are excited to start our spring semester in a week. So that's where we are right now. Are there any questions? Any answers? No. Okay, for our notes tonight, I just want to discuss today and the news we gained about an hour ago, or 2 hours ago. Our school district is aware that the Supreme Court judge on Long Island last evening ruled that the New York State governor's school mask mandate is unconstitutional. The state of New York has already taken steps to appeal that decision, and the New York State Civil Practice Rules provide for an automatic stay of the enforcement of the Nassau County judge's decision while the appeal is pending. There is a legal question as to whether that decision is binding on our school district. While the litigation gets resolved on the courts, the state education department, the local and county departments of health, the CDC, and our local medical director have agreed that masking in schools is required to limit the spread of COVID-19. In fact, the state education department issued a statement that explicitly stated, therefore, schools must continue to follow the mask rule. Our school district is going to continue to require all students and staff to wear masks until the litigation is finally adjudicated. We were informed this afternoon that we'll be getting an additional roughly 2,200 test kits from New York State. We'll communicate out shortly how they'll be sent home once we get them in our possession. This Friday, we're having an alternative learning day. As you know, districts in our area and across the country have been seeing unprecedented absences among students and staff due to COVID-19 pandemic. We recognize the impact these absences may have had on students and our staff workloads. In an effort to provide the opportunity for our learning community to readjust, reorganize themselves ahead of the second half of the school year, Our schools will not be open for in-person learning this Friday, January 28th, for students in grades K through 12. This means that all students in grades K through 12 will have an asynchronous learning day, where they work on lessons independently as assigned by their teachers and/or catch up on some projects. This change is only for Friday, January 28th. All UPK students in the district and at Imagination Child Care Academy will attend school in person as scheduled on that day. We acknowledge the inconvenience this may cause for some of our families. Just like emergency closing days, we never take lightly the decision to make changes to this nature. However, this asynchronous day will give our staff the opportunity to revisit their plans based on their experiences this fall and most recently. The significant absences due to COVID-19. Providing this time for staff to reevaluate, reassess, and re-energize based on student needs will result in even better teaching and learning in our classrooms in the spring semester. Also this Friday, our outstanding food service staff will be providing free meals. So all Gates Charlie students can pick up free meals at either Paul Road or the middle school between 11:30 and 12:30 on Friday. Again, we had our hearing earlier tonight for our capital project vote. Residents of Gates Charlie for at least the last 30 days prior to the February 2nd vote can vote from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the high school gymnasium foyer. And today we welcome back Miss Liz Konar. She started today at Paul Road, filling in for Principal Hens while he'll be out. We're excited to have such a great leader as Mrs. Konar come in to replace a legend, Mr. Hens, and we hope that he has a quick recovery and can get back soon. And the last thing we'd like to talk about tonight is then on a real positive note, one of our own. I'd like to congratulate Rob Long on becoming the acting Gates PD chief, and in February, our Gates PD chief. You're going to be amazing. We're looking forward to when you are official in February, and thank you for all that you have done leading the department and taking care of Gates Charlie. We're excited to see where you take our local police to the next level, and thank you for all that you do and all that your team does. That is my report, sir.
Thank you very much. Moving on, motion to adjourn. Mr. Moscato and Ms. Ensign. All in favor? The vote is unanimous. We are adjourned.